The wind howled through the empty streets of North Hollow like a chorus of forgotten souls. The town had been almost entirely abandoned for decades, except for the old railway line that cut through the heart of it, a tract so neglected it looked like nature had swallowed it whole. My name is Ethan Cross, and I had just been assigned as the night operator at Hollow Creek Station, a small, isolated train stop tucked between dense forests in upstate New York. When my transfer notice arrived, I thought it was a joke. Why would anyone want a station that hasn't had a regular train stop in 40 years? But the Federal Transit Department insisted. It's part of an experimental revival program, they said. That was enough for me to pack my bags and drive through the foggy, winding back roads toward North Hollow. The drive was unsettling from the start. The GPS cut out repeatedly, static filling the screen, and I kept seeing shapes moving along the tree-line shapes that vanished whenever I blinked. By the time I arrived at the station, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving nothing but a pale crescent moon to light the cracked asphalt platform. Hollow Creek Station was a relic from the 1920s, with peeling paint, rusted tracks, and a ticket booth that looked like it hadn't seen a soul in decades. A single lamppost flickered weakly, casting long shadows that twisted unnaturally across the platform. I parked my truck and stepped out, my boots crunching over broken glass and dead leaves. That's when I heard a soft, hurried footstep behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. The shadows stretched unnaturally, like black smoke reaching for me. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself the wind was playing tricks, that I was letting my imagination run wild. Inside the station, I met Harold, the janitor, who had been assigned to maintain the building. He was a thin, hunched man with wild gray hair and dark rings under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in years. He greeted me with a nod but didn't speak much. Instead, he handed me a steaming cup of coffee and mumbled something that made my skin crawl. "Don't let the platform catch your eye after midnight. She's still running." I laughed nervously, assuming he meant one of the old local ghost stories. Running? Who? He only shook his head and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the office wing. His warning lingered in the air, cold and heavy. I tried to settle in. My first night was supposed to be uneventful. Monitor the old train schedules, update the logs, and make sure the lights stayed on. But at exactly 12:17 a.m., I heard it. The distant wail of a train horn. The sound should have been comforting, familiar, but it wasn't. It was shrill, almost human, filled with sorrow and anger. I ran to the window. The platform was emptier, so I thought. A figure darted across the tracks, moving faster than any human could. A young woman, pale and drenched in moonlight, her hair streaming behind her like smoke. She ran toward the station, but every time I blinked, she seemed to vanish. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. Something about the way she moved unnaturally fast, yet graceful made my stomach twist. The legend Harold muttered about suddenly felt very real. As the train approached, the driver slowed slightly, squinting at the darkened platform. His eyes widened in horror. Then the train surged forward again, almost as if invisible hands were pushing him away. And there she was again, the girl, now directly in front of the train, running alongside the rails like a specter. My blood ran cold. I locked the office door, trying to tell myself it was a hallucination. I couldn't move, couldn't think, as the wind carried faint whispers through the broken windows. Go. Leave. Before she finds you. That night, I realized Hollow Creek Station was alive in a way no living person could understand. And whatever haunted this place wasn't going anywhere. I had no choice. I had to survive the night. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old station made me jump. Every gust of wind rattling the broken windows felt like it carried voices. I kept replaying what I'd seen: the pale girl, running faster than any human should, her eyes empty yet piercing. My mind screamed that I had to leave, but part of me, a darker curiosity, refused to abandon Hollow Creek Station without understanding it. By 3 a.m., the platform was silent again. The train tracks, old and rusted, stretched into darkness, swallowed by fog that seemed almost alive. I decided to inspect the station's perimeter, hoping that seeing things up close would calm my nerves. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, the beam cutting through the oppressive blackness. The air was unnaturally cold, so cold it burned my lungs. Leaves swirled around me, though the wind had died down. That's when I saw the first clue: footprints. Not ordinary footprints, barefoot, impossibly small, and wet, like someone had run straight through water that didn't exist. They started at the edge of the tracks and disappeared near the ticket booth. My stomach churned. I called out, "Hello, Harold, anyone?" Only the echo of my voice answered me. Then, a soft laugh, childlike haunting, drifted from the shadows. It wasn't inhuman, but it carried a malice I couldn't name. I froze, every nerve screaming. The laugh grew louder, circling me, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Suddenly, the lights in the office flickered, then went out completely. I was plunged into darkness, only my flashlight piercing a narrow beam. I tried to rationalize old wiring drafts, imagination, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. I heard footsteps again, this time deliberate, slow, heavy. I swung the flashlight, and for a moment, I saw her, the girl. Her face was pale, eyes wide and unblinking, hair wet and clinging to her face like strands of shadow. She stopped just at the edge of the platform, staring at me, tilting her head unnaturally. I took a step back. My mind screamed to run, but my legs refused. Something about her gaze held me there, frozen. Then she darted toward me, not running. This time, floating, gliding across the platform with impossible speed. I stumbled backward into the ticket booth and slammed the door, heart hammering. Inside. I grabbed the radio and tried to call the station's main office. Nothing. No response. The line was dead. Even my phone had no signal. It was as if Hollow Creek Station existed in its own separate world, cut off from everything else. Minutes passed like hours. Then silence. Complete silence. Too complete. The kind of silence that makes your own heartbeat sound deafening. I slowly opened the booth door, flashlight shaking in my hands. The platform was empty. No footprints, no girl, no sign of anything unusual except a single wet handprint on the glass door, small, impossibly cold to the touch. I backed away. That's when I noticed the train schedule. Faded and yellowed, it wasn't like any schedule I'd ever seen. All the trains were listed as cancelled. But the last entry, tonight, a train arriving at 12:17 a.m., exactly the time I'd first seen her. And next to it, in a handwriting I didn't recognize, were the words, "She will run, you will watch." Panic hit me like a tidal wave. I realized that I wasn't just witnessing something strange, I was being watched. The station was alive, and it was aware of me. I had no idea what had happened here in the past, but I knew one thing: if I stayed, I would see her again, and next time, I might not get away by the first light of dawn. Exhausted and shaking, I sat in the office and tried to record everything in the log, but even the pen felt wrong, like it didn't want to write the truth. The station had its own story, and I was just a visitor in its dark, relentless memory. That morning, Harold appeared, carrying 2 cups of coffee, silent as always. I wanted to ask him more about the girl, about the station's history, but the words stuck in my throat. I had seen enough for one night. He gave me a look that said, without words, "You survived. That's all that matters." But deep down, I knew survival was only the beginning. By sunrise, Hollow Creek Station looked almost peaceful, but I knew better. The fog that had settled overnight clung stubbornly to the tracks, curling around the platform like tendrils. I refused to leave, though part of me screamed I should. I had to know what I was dealing with. Why, the girl appeared, and why this station seemed alive. I started with the station records. The files were brittle and yellowed, stored in a cabinet so old that opening it made the wood groan like a corpse. As I sifted through decades of maintenance logs and employee reports, I realized the horror I was stepping into. There had been accidents, many accidents. The earliest entry, dated 1947, described a teenage girl named Lillian Hayes, who had been hit by a train while trying to catch a late-night ride home. Her body was never fully recovered. The logs noted only fragments found along the track. Subsequent entries over the decades mentioned strange phenomena, lights flickering without cause, phantom footsteps, disembodied voices, trains inexplicably stopping or speeding up, employees quitting abruptly, claiming they had seen her running. One report caught my attention. A night operator from 1973 wrote, "I watched her run along the platform tonight, faster than any human. She stared at me, and I felt my soul leave my body. I quit immediately. I cannot return." I shivered. The same sensation I felt last night, the paralyzing fear. The weight of her gaze was described in detail here. I needed answers, and Harold was the only person here who might give them. I found him near the old water pump outside, his back hunched, sweeping the platform. I approached cautiously. "Harold," I said, "I need to know what's really happening here. Who is she?" He stopped, leaning on his broom. His eyes, dark and hollow, met mine. "You don't want to know," he said. "If you value your mind, don't dig. She's not like anything you've seen. Hollow Creek isn't just haunted, it's hers. And anyone who stays the night becomes part of it." I swallowed hard. Part of it. What does that mean? Harold didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a small, leather-bound journal. "If you insist," he muttered, "read this, but be careful. Once you start, there's no stopping." I opened it carefully. The journal belonged to a former station manager named Robert Camden, who had worked here in the 1980s. His entries chronicled increasingly disturbing encounters, doors slamming on their own, cold spots that burned like fire, the girl appearing nightly on the platform, sometimes in fragments, sometimes whole, always running, always watching. One entry, dated October 13th, 1984, made my blood run cold. "I tried to stop her last night. I ran onto the platform, yelling, waving my arms. She ran faster, I swear, faster than the train itself. She looked at me, and I saw everything, all the pain, all the fear. I can't explain it. I felt my life slipping away. I can't return. God help anyone who does." I felt my hands shake as I closed the journal. Everything I had seen, every whisper, every impossible movement, it was all part of the same story. The night was coming again. I had hours to prepare, and yet every instinct in me screamed to leave. But curiosity, and maybe a part of some foolish pride, kept me at Hollow Creek. I had to survive tonight. I had to see her again. But this time, I needed a plan. I set up cameras across the platform, pointing down the tracks, and even at the ticket booth. I hoped to capture what I could, to understand, to prove that this wasn't just in my mind. And then I waited. At 12:17 a.m., the horn sounded. The first train of the night approached, slow and heavy. I gripped the camera remote, heart hammering. The fog swirled, and I saw movement in the shadows. She appeared, running, faster than ever. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, faint shapes shimmered, other figures, blurry, incomplete. Past victims, lost souls. I couldn't tell. The sight made my stomach twist, and then she turned her gaze to me, directly at me. I realized, with a terrifying clarity, she wasn't just haunting the station. She was hunting me. I could feel my heartbeat echoing in my ears, loud enough to drown out everything else, the distant hum of the approaching train, the creak of the old station, even the whispering wind. My hand shook as I gripped the camera remote, trying to stay calm. But there was no calm here. Not at Hollow Creek, not with her. The train horn blasted again, closer this time. Its shrill cry tore through the fog. I pressed my face to the camera feed, watching the platform. And there she was, the girl. Pale, wet hair, plastered to her face. Eyes hollow yet piercing, running faster than the train itself. Behind her, the faint, blurry forms of others, shadows of those who had vanished here before. I swallowed hard. My instincts screamed to hide, to run, but my legs refused. I had to see this through. I had to survive. Then, without warning, she stopped mid-stride. The fog seemed to part around her, and for the first time, I saw her face clearly. Her eyes weren't just empty, they were burning with rage, sorrow, and something far darker, something almost intelligent. She stared at me, and then she ran not along the platform, but straight at me, faster than any human being should. Move. I stumbled backward, tripping over a broken bench, and crashed into the ticket booth. The camera fell to the floor, flashing static before going dark. I scrambled to my feet. My hands searched blindly for anything to defend myself. A metal wrench. Anything. She was almost upon me. Then, a sound, a whisper, soft and breathless, echoing in my mind rather than my ears. Leave, or join us. I froze. The words weren't spoken aloud, yet I heard them as clearly as if she were standing next to me. My body screamed to obey, to flee, but my mind demanded answers. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on. She was gone. The platform empty. The train, which should have stopped, screeched past the station, too fast, too close. Its roar shook the ground beneath me. I looked around. No footprints, no trace of her presence, except for a faint handprint on the glass of the ticket booth. Wet, cold, and impossibly small. My skin crawled. I didn't sleep that morning. I couldn't. Every sound, every shadow, every creak of the old station made my nerves snap tighter. I knew she would return tonight, and I didn't know if I would survive. I tried to research more about Lillian Hayes, the girl who had died on these tracks decades ago. Local news archives revealed a tragic story. A runaway teen, desperate to catch the last train home, struck by an oncoming train. Her body never fully recovered, and the station was closed for over 40 years after several unexplained accidents. What I realized then was chilling. Hollow Creek Station wasn't just haunted, it was a trap. It was alive, and it fed on anyone who stayed. The ghost wasn't random. She hunted, and I was her next target. By nightfall, I was ready, or as ready as I could be. I blocked the doors of the office with old crates, laid down salt lines I found in the janitor's closet, and even sprinkled iron filings along the platform edge, anything to give me a fighting chance. I set the cameras around the platform, again, praying they would capture what I could not face directly. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the horn sounded. The train barreled through the fog, and there she was, running, screaming, faster than ever. My heart stopped as I realized the truth. She wasn't just running, she was coming for me, and I had nowhere to hide. I barely survived that night. The ghost, the girl, moved with a speed and precision that defied everything I knew about the world. She wasn't just a spirit. She was something more, something bound to Hollow Creek Station in a way that made every fiber of the building pulse. With life. Morning light did nothing to ease the horror. The traces she left, the wet handprints, the cold spots, the footprints that led nowhere remained. Even the cameras I had set up were mysteriously wiped clean. It was as if the station itself didn't want me to record the truth. I realized then that I couldn't face this alone. I needed help, someone who understood the supernatural, someone who could explain what I was up against. I drove to the nearest town, Ashfield, a sleepy place 2 hours from North Hollow, and found Dr. Evelyn Moore, a folklorist and paranormal researcher. She was skeptical at first, but when I showed her the journal, the photos of the platform, and described what I had seen, her eyes widened. "This isn't just a haunting," she said quietly. "This is a tethered spirit. She's bound to this location, but she's angry hungry even. Hollow Creek Station isn't just haunted, it's a trap. People who stay too long vanish." I felt a chill run down my spine. Vanishing. "You mean she kills them?" Evelyn nodded grimly. "Metaphorically, yes. In other cases, physically. Her death was violent, and the station amplified it. Her spirit relives that moment over and over. Anyone who interferes suffers her wrath." We returned to Hollow Creek Station that night. I had no choice. I had to face her, and with Evelyn's guidance, I might survive. We set up an array of cameras, infrared sensors, and protective wards Evelyn insisted upon. I could feel her presence. As soon as the fog rolled in, the wind seemed to whisper my name, and the shadows moved unnaturally. At 12:17 a.m., the horn sounded, and there she was, running along the platform, but something was different this time. Her eyes, once hollow, now glowed with a fiery intensity. Behind her, the shadowy figures of past victims coalesced into vague human forms. They moved in unison, circling her, waiting, watching, as if she were the conductor of this macabre orchestra. I held my breath, trembling. Evelyn whispered an incantation I didn't understand, and I saw a shimmer around the girl, a flicker of her humanity, buried deep beneath the rage. I realized that she wasn't evil. She was trapped, replaying her death for decades, tethered by the violent memory that Hollow Creek Station had absorbed. But the realization brought no comfort. She turned her gaze to me, and the hunger was unmistakable. She ran not toward the platform this time, but straight at the office. I slammed the reinforced door, gripping a metal rod, ready to defend myself. The building shook as her presence pressed against it. The lights flickered violently, shadows dancing across every surface. Her scream pierced my ears, a sound that was half human, half something monstrous. Then she vanished. Silence. The fog cleared. My chest heaved, and I realized I had survived, barely. Evelyn looked at me, her expression grim. "She's not done with you, and she returned tonight. We need to find the source, the moment that binds her here. Only then can she be released, or stopped." I knew the horrifying truth. Hollow Creek Station had a secret buried beneath the tracks. Something in the past, some event that chained Lillian's spirit, had to be unearthed. And I was the only one foolish or desperate enough to dig it up. The night wasn't over. It would never be over until I faced the station's darkest secret. The sun had long disappeared behind thick clouds when Evelyn and I returned to Hollow Creek Station. The fog rolled in like a living creature, curling around the cracked platform, shifting unnaturally as if anticipating our every move. My stomach churned with dread, but I couldn't turn back now. Evelyn brought with her a set of tools, ground penetrating radar, infrared cameras, and an assortment of old iron talismans she claimed would help ward off the spirit temporarily. "We need to find the epicenter," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Whatever is anchoring Lillian here, it's buried somewhere beneath these tracks. If we can locate it, we can begin to sever the bond." I followed her to the far end of the platform, where the rails dipped slightly into a depression, almost as if the earth itself was bowing under some ancient weight. The fog thickened, making everything beyond 20 feet disappear into gray nothingness. Evelyn crouched, placing the radar scanner on the ground. The device hummed and beeped erratically, lights flickering as it scanned the soil beneath the tracks. "There," she whispered, pointing. "Something dense, metal, not natural. It's buried deeply, but it's here." I shined my flashlight over the spot. The ground looked ordinary and gravel, but a subtle depression ran along the rails, as though something had been hidden there for decades. I grabbed a small crowbar, my hands trembling, and started digging. The earth was damp and cold, clinging to my gloves like a living thing. Hours passed. Each handful of dirt felt heavier than the last, and every sound, the creak of the rails, the whisper of the wind, made me flinch. Then I hit something hard. My crowbar struck a metal box, rusted and pitted with age. Evelyn helped me pry it open. Inside was a small chest, sealed tightly. My heart pounded as I lifted the lid, revealing a bundle wrapped in oil-stained cloth. Unwrapping it carefully, I saw her a doll, antique and broken, her glass eyes cracked, her face twisted in two. A silent scream. A diary lay beneath it, pages brittle and yellowed. I opened the diary. The first page was Lillian's handwriting. They told me I couldn't ride the last train. They said I was too late. I ran anyway. I tried to stop it. I tried to save myself, but it was too fast, too cruel. I want someone to understand, please. Evelyn's face was pale. This is what anchors her, she said. The doll, the diary, objects of her life at the moment of death. The station feeds on them, traps her here. It's a psychic tether. Before I could respond, a cold gust slammed into us. The fog thickened instantly, and a shadow darted across the platform. Lillian appeared, running faster than ever, her scream shrill and unbearable. The air around her shimmered like static, electricity, warping the world itself. I stumbled backward, clutching the doll and diary. Evelyn shouted over the chaos. "We have to take them inside the office. Seal the doors." We ran, the fog swirling like a living predator around us. I could feel her presence pressing, suffocating, bending reality. As soon as we slammed the office door and barricaded it, the shaking stopped. Silence fell, but it was heavier than ever, as if the station itself was holding its breath. Evelyn looked at me, her eyes wide. "This isn't over," she said. "We found the anchor, but she knows we have it. Tonight, she'll come for us. And if we fail, the station will claim us both." I held the diary and doll, my fingers trembling. Lillian's presence lingered, just beyond the walls, palpable and hungry. For the first time, I understood the full scope of Hollow Creek Station. It wasn't just haunted. It was a living nightmare, feeding on the fear and desperation of anyone who entered. And we were trapped. Inside, night fell faster than I expected. Hollow Creek Station seemed to darken even earlier, as if the sun itself refused to linger near this place. Every shadow looked alive, twisting in the fog, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. I gripped the doll and diary, my hands shaking, knowing that tonight we would confront Lillian directly. Evelyn had prepared a circle of protective wards inside the office. Candles burned at each corner, iron filings scattered along the floor, and strange sigils drawn with chalk formed a barrier around us. She instructed me to remain inside the circle at all times, no matter what I heard or saw. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the horn blasted. The train's sound was deafening, yet it brought no comfort, no reassurance that normalcy existed. I could feel the air thicken, the temperature dropping dramatically. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, but I stayed rooted in the protective circle. And then she appeared. Lillian ran across the platform, faster than ever, but this time, her movement was different. She didn't merely glide, she shattered the world around her. Fog warped, the lights flickered, and the air seemed to pulse with her presence. Behind her, the shadows of the victims she had collected over decades coalesced into partial forms, reaching for us. Howling silently, Evelyn whispered urgently, "The tether. Place the doll and diary in the center of the circle. That's the key. You must focus." I set the objects down, my hands trembling violently. Lillian's scream pierced the night, sharp and filled with anger, and I could see her ghostly form distort, eyes glowing red-hot with rage. She lunged at the circle, and I felt a psychic pressure pressing against my mind, threatening to pull me into the fog with her. "Hold the circle," Evelyn shouted. Her voice was firm, chanting words. I didn't understand, but the rhythm seemed to repel Lillian's force. The shadows writhed, screaming without sound, but the circle held. I focused on the doll and diary. I imagined releasing her pain, freeing her from the moment of death that had trapped her for decades. Her screams became wails, then cries, then something almost human, anguished, sorrowful, desperate. The fog swirled violently, and then, suddenly, the train horn blared, but the train never appeared. The tracks were empty. I realized the station itself was trying to prevent her release, twisting reality, bending the rules of the world to keep her tethered. I clenched my fists, pouring all my focus into the tether. The doll shook violently, the diary pages flipping, as if caught in a storm. Lillian's figure began to blur, her rage giving way to confusion, then to despair. The shadows of the other victims shrieked, dissipating into the fog, and then, in a blinding flash, she was gone. Silence. The fog lifted, leaving the platform illuminated by pale moonlight. The doll and diary lay inert, lifeless. The scream had ended. I sank to the floor, gasping for air. Evelyn looked exhausted, pale, but alive. "It's done. For now," she said. "The tether is broken, but Hollow Creek will never be completely safe. Some part of her may remain. Some part of the station will always remember." I held the doll and diary, the weight of decades of horror finally lifting. But even as relief washed over me, a shiver ran down my spine. Outside, the tracks stretched into darkness, silent, empty, but I knew, in my gut, that Hollow Creek Station had not finished with me. The first confrontation had ended. We had survived, but the battle was far from over. The night after the confrontation, Hollow Creek Station felt different. The oppressive weight of the fog was gone, but a subtle unease lingered in the air, like the station was watching, waiting. Lillian's tether had been broken, but some residue of her rage remained. The shadows she had commanded were gone, but their echoes lingered in the corners of my vision. Evelyn and I spent the next day combing through local archives, old newspapers, and town records in Ashfield. What we found chilled us to the bone. Hollow Creek Station had always been a place of tragedy. Long before Lillian's death in 1947, the station was the site of multiple horrific accidents. A construction collapse in 1922 had killed dozens of workers. In 1938, a train derailment took the lives of a dozen passengers, including children. Each death left its imprint, feeding the station with grief, fear, and anger. But it wasn't random, it was concentrated. Lillian's death had been the final, most violent incident, and because of the station's history, her spirit had been amplified. She hadn't just died, she had become part of Hollow Creek, a perfect storm of trauma and despair. Evelyn frowned, turning the brittle pages of a 1940s newspaper. "Look at this," she said. "There are reports of people seeing shadows on the platform before Lillian even died. Employees quitting, children disappearing, strange lights at night. The station has been feeding for decades." Lillian's spirit just crystallized all that energy into one unstoppable force. I swallowed hard. So she wasn't alone. "Not really," Evelyn said. "The station itself has absorbed the pain and anger of every death." Lillian's spirit became a focal point, a way for the station to manifest its malevolence. That's why she was so fast, so violent, so relentless. She was the station's avatar. That night, we returned to Hollow Creek, determined to investigate the tracks further, hoping to find other objects or remnants that bound the lingering energy. The platform was eerily calm, the fog absent, but every step we took felt like it was watched. We descended into the maintenance tunnels beneath the tracks, flashlights slicing through the darkness. Rusted pipes groaned, and the walls seemed to breathe. Shadows flickered at the edges of our vision, and for a moment, I could swear I heard children laughing high-pitched, distant. echoing through the tunnels. Evelyn shone her infrared camera. On the walls, faint outlines of human figures appeared, trapped in the walls themselves, impossible shapes moving in unnatural ways. These are echoes, she whispered. The station remembers every person who died here, every scream, every fear. It's embedded in the structure. Hollow Creek isn't just haunted, it's sentient. I shivered. And Lillian, she became its voice. Exactly, Evelyn said. And the worst part, these echoes can still influence the living. They can lure people in, disorient them, make them relive tragedies. That's why the station was dangerous even before Lillian's death. As we moved further into the tunnels, we discovered an old storage room, sealed with rusted chains. Inside were remnants of abandoned construction, tools, broken equipment, and most disturbingly, human bones, yellowed and brittle, scattered across the floor. My stomach turned. These are victims, I whispered. Part of the station, Evelyn said. Not all, but some. These deaths were never recorded properly, never mourned. Hollow Creek keeps its secrets buried here. That's why Lillian's tether was so strong. She was connected to every unremembered death, every act of negligence and violence. A low rumble shook the tunnels. The station seemed to respond to our presence, groaning and vibrating. Shadows stretched across the walls, coalescing into shapes that seemed human at first glance. Then distorted, grotesque, almost alive. I realized then that our battle wasn't just with Lillian, it was with Hollow Creek itself. Her spirit was gone, but the station still remembered, still hungered. And as the rumble grew louder, I understood. The station was awakening. The tunnels beneath Hollow Creek Station felt alive, almost breathing. Every creak of the rusted pipes echoed like a scream, and shadows shifted in ways that made no sense. The station wasn't just haunted, it was awake. Evelyn and I had our protective circle, our wards, and our talismans, but as soon as we moved deeper, the atmosphere thickened. The air grew cold, freezing our breath in visible puffs, and the walls seemed to close in. I could hear whispers in every direction, soft and sinister, repeating my name, calling me forward, luring me deeper into the darkness. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic clang rang out. The shadows condensed into forms, grotesque and distorted, human-like but twisted, eyes glowing faint red. They lunged toward us, and I swung my crowbar blindly, but it passed through them like mist. Evelyn shouted, "They're echoes. Ignore them. Focus on the center." The station itself began to move. The floor trembled beneath our feet, rails creaked, and the ceiling groaned like some colossal living creature. Dust and debris rained down as the walls seemed to pulse with each heartbeat of the building. Then, I saw her, Lillian, not fully formed, but a projection of her rage and despair, flickering like a broken reflection in water. Her eyes blazed with fury, and she screamed not with her voice, but with the sound of every tragedy that had ever occurred in Hollow Creek. The station resonated with her scream, amplifying it, bending the air itself. Evelyn grabbed my arm. "The tether isn't enough. We need to confront the station itself. The doll, the diary, they're anchors, but the station is alive. You need to face it." I swallowed my fear and stepped toward the center of the tunnels, holding the doll and diary above my head. "I know what you are," I shouted into the darkness. "Your pain, your fear. You're not invincible." The station responded immediately. The tunnels twisted violently. Shadows twisted into massive forms, trying to crush us. The air turned viscous, making every step a struggle. But as I held the anchors high, the wards and sigils began to glow, and a low hum reverberated through the walls, countering the station's pressure. I focused on the diary, reading aloud Lillian's words, her pleas for understanding, her fear, her pain. The doll shook violently in my hands. The shadows recoiled. The station seemed to convulse in anger, but the ward held. For a moment, Silence fell. The shadows froze. The fog lifted in the tunnels. I could feel Lillian's presence separate from the station, weaker, smaller. She flickered, her rage dimming. Evelyn stepped forward, chanting an incantation that I didn't understand. The doll and diary glowed bright white, and for a brief, terrifying moment, Lillian appeared before us, whole and human-looking, not a twisted shadow but a frightened girl. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and sorrow, then dissolved into a mist that the station absorbed. The rumbling stopped, the shadows vanished. Hollow Creek Station was eerily quiet, as though it had just exhaled after centuries of rage. We were alive. But as we emerged from the tunnels, the platform empty and calm, I knew something had changed. Hollow Creek had been challenged, but it would never forgive, and it would never forget. I realized the final truth. Lillian's spirit was free, but Hollow Creek itself, this sentient, hungry, remembering entity remained, and it would always be waiting, always listening, always ready to reclaim anyone who entered. The first rays of dawn broke over Hollow Creek Station, painting the abandoned platform in a weak, pale light. The fog had lifted completely, and for the first time in weeks, the air felt still, but stillness here was deceptive. Evelyn and I emerged from the tunnels, exhausted, bruised, and drenched in sweat. Lillian's spirit had been freed, but the station itself loomed above us, silent yet aware. I could feel it in every vibration of the tracks, every whisper of wind through the broken windows. Hollow Creek had not been defeated. It had been challenged and it had survived. We walked along the platform, the doll and diaries secured in a backpack, their weight a reminder of the horrors we'd witnessed. Evelyn's face was pale, her hands trembling. "She's gone," she said softly, "but not entirely. There are echoes, residues of everything that's happened here. The station, it remembers." I glanced down the tracks, seeing only empty rails stretching into mist. My heartbeat slowed slightly, though fear still lingered in the pit of my stomach. I knew she was gone, but I also knew the station was alive, and it would always wait for the next victim. Later, in Ashfield, we buried the doll and diary in consecrated ground, hoping that would sever the remaining ties. The soil was cold, the air heavy with rain, but at least, for now, Lillian was at peace. Yet, even as I tried to sleep that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of my apartment, every flicker of streetlights, made me jump. Hollow Creek Station had left a mark on me, an imprint of its hunger, its awareness. I realized that even if I never returned, part of me would always be tied to that place, as if a shadow of the station itself had embedded in my soul. Weeks later, news of Hollow Creek Station's reopening circulated. Tourists were eager to explore the historic site, unaware of its dark past. I watched the reports, heart pounding, knowing what they didn't. The station waited, patient, intelligent, and hungry, and I knew it would never stop. As I lay in bed one night, unable to sleep, a soft, almost imperceptible whistle echoed in the distance. Not a train, but a voice. A whisper carried on the wind, unmistakable. "Welcome back." I froze, and then I realized the truth. Hollow Creek Station never truly dies, and anyone who enters, anyone who dares to walk its empty platforms at night, risks becoming part of its history forever. The lights in my room flickered once, then went out. Silence followed, but in that silence, I could feel it watching, waiting, remembering. Hollow Creek was alive, and it was hungry.